Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Astrology News Report, presented by yours truly, Ron Berger. Today is September 20th, 2020. In this segment, we'll take a look at a couple of important planets and what they are doing in the zodiac, Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter and Saturn have key parts to play in Vedic astrology analysis. Jupiter has mostly positive significations. It is dubbed the Great Benefic. Saturn's significations are weighted to the negative side. It is called the Great Malefic. They do have rather different natures, which in some ways are quite opposite. Jupiter is the energy of expansion. Saturn is the energy of limitation. Jupiter is optimistic. Saturn is harsh realities. Jupiter is encouraging. Saturn is discouraging. Jupiter is faith and belief. Saturn is rules and regulations. Both are relatively slow-moving. Jupiter spends a year transiting through a sign, 12 years to make a complete circuit of the zodiac. Saturn spends 2 to 3 years in a sign and takes 28 years to finish through all 12 signs. How they interact with the other planets and with the signs has a lot to do with what sorts of events occur in our world. During 2020, both Jupiter and Saturn are spending most of their time in signs that they own. Jupiter is in Sagittarius, Saturn is in Capricorn. A planet is strong in its own sign, both for the planets and for the sign's significations. Jupiter in Sagittarius emphasizes the Sagittarian attachment to truth and justice. But since Sagittarius is a fire sign, it is egocentric. This means that the truth and justice of Sagittarius is not objective, but rather subjective. In other words, it's personal truth, based on personal opinions. Of course, since the energy is available to everyone, what we get is intense partisan politics. Saturn in Capricorn emphasizes the Capricorn desire to set goals and achieve them. Capricorn is one of the earth signs, therefore practical. In other words, its goals are tangible goals, intended to produce substantial, usable results. We're not talking about theoretical stuff here. Saturn in Capricorn emphasizes the Saturnian realism. Saturn's talent for keeping things under control goes well with Capricorn's managerial skills. For an example, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was born with Saturn in Capricorn. He's totally practical and strategic about getting his goals accomplished. A planet that is either beginning or ending a retrograde period is barely moving in the zodiac. It's stationary. A stationary planet is extra strong. During September 2020, Jupiter and Saturn get an extra dose of strength because they are both stationary this month due to ending their respective retrograde periods. Another way that a planet picks up strength is by becoming the dispositor of other planets. This happens when a planet owns a sign that another planet is transiting in. The other planet's energy gets transferred to the owner of the sign. In this way, Saturn has become the dispositor of Neptune, which has been transiting in Saturn's sign Aquarius since 2009. Neptune is quite the opposite of Saturn by nature. Neptune is the planet of dreams and imagination. Saturn is ultra-realism. What's interesting here is that Aquarius is the sign of social revolution. Aquarius is the social humanitarian of the zodiac. How is this possible? How can one of Saturn's signs stand for something that seems unrealistic? The reason is found in another side of Saturn. Being the planet of work, Saturn is the planet of the workers, and that extends to government by the workers. In other words, democracy. So, here we have an interesting astrological tidbit. The social idealism of Neptune transiting in Aquarius is actually contributing to the Saturn signification of democracy. Now, with Jupiter, since Pluto is transiting in Sagittarius, Jupiter has become Pluto's dispositor. This energy pattern gets even more strength due to Pluto and Jupiter being conjunct. Jupiter is absorbing Pluto energy and vice versa. Jupiter is law and justice. Pluto is destruction and rebirth. So this has some interesting repercussions. One of them is the Plutonian destruction of law and justice, which gets replaced with Sagittarian personal truth. A good example currently would be the mighty duo of Donald Trump and his Attorney General Bill Barr. The situation with Jupiter and Pluto gets even more power when Mars retrogrades into Pisces. Retrograde Mars is a particularly malefic energy package. The planet of force has become pressurized by its retrograde condition. Upon entering Jupiter's sign on October 3rd, Mars will contribute its coercive, combative energy to the Jupiter-Pluto combination, which will make Jupiter in Sagittarius even more combustible, aggressive, and potentially more destructive. Of course, all of this is occurring in the final weeks leading up to the November 3rd U.S. elections, so we can expect even more intensity, devotion to ideologies, weaponized messaging, controversy, and so on. When we transplant the transit positions of Jupiter and Saturn into the USA natal chart, we see some interesting combinations. Since Sagittarius is the rising sign of the USA chart, the Jupiter-Pluto combination is affecting the ascendant, the identity of the nation. Note, too, that Jupiter and Pluto are transiting directly across from, and therefore aspecting, the USA natal Sun, which is another significator of ego and identity, and represents the leadership of the country. Thus, the devotion to ideology, as well as the potential for self-destruction, are strong in the country right now. But let's remember that Pluto is also the planet of rebirth and regeneration. So, after first causing destruction, there is the promise of the nation being reborn. Meanwhile, Saturn is transiting in the early degrees of Capricorn, which is the second house of the chart. From this position, Saturn is directly aspecting the USA natal Mercury. The second house is the nation's finances, including the buying power of the people. Saturn is the reality check planet, here in the practical sign of tangible results. So, as usual, it's the economy that is a prime concern at election time. The direct aspect of transiting Saturn on natal Mercury is yet another factor. Saturn is the planet of restriction and control. Mercury is the planet of making choices, and therefore voting. Mercury, as the planet of communications, is also the planet signifying the male. Obviously, this pattern is manifesting in the form of the Republicans' efforts to limit the popular vote in this election. The situation with Jupiter and Saturn will change on November 20th. That's when Jupiter will be finished with its transit in Sagittarius and will move into Capricorn, where it will team up with Saturn, and it will be a whole new ballgame. I'll have plenty to say about that in a future report. Okay, that's it for this week. Hope it's been useful to you. Next week we'll take a look at what's coming up for October. Until then.